here in America during the pandemic, right?
Well, we know that U.S. small business is suffering. According to the U.S. Census, 75% tapped financial aid in the recent government stimulus program. And so they're looking to sell elsewhere, with most of the U.S. shut down in the month of April. And Alibaba.com says that they are doing it on their platform. For instance, they tell us that transactions involving U.S. businesses on Alibaba.com up 120% in the month of April. And the number of active buyers from the U.S. were up 76% in the month as well. And from February to March, a lot of demand for a lot of different categories as well. Yoga wear was up 120%, casual shoes, outdoor furniture, education, toys. So let's bring in John Kaplan, Alibaba.com's president of North America and Europe, to discuss more. And these are very surprisingly strong numbers, wouldn't you say, John? And I'm surprised because, you know, we know Alibaba.com, and Alibaba is one of the largest Chinese companies in the world. And given the rhetoric over COVID stemming from China, were you surprised by the interest from U.S. companies?
You know, it's good to be with you this morning. I can say COVID has had a incredible disruption.
U.S. funding and remove U.S. membership to the WHO if the WHO doesn't change its pro-China bias, he says, and reversing their alarming lack of independence from Beijing. So this weekend, Trump threatened to reduce funding to 10%. Now it's to zero. Don't forget that the U.S. contributed around $450 million last year to the World Health Organization. China contributed just $85 million in comparison. But yesterday, we heard from Chinese President Xi Jinping saying that he's going to contribute $2 billion over 2 years on top of an extra $50 million. But is money enough at this point?
Okay, we hear it. I'd like to see some more of these multilateral institutions called out when they keep the Taiwans of this world out, or the Israels of this world out. Call them out.
Yeah.
Come on.
That's a long-term problem to solve, though, not overnight.
It sure is. No, not overnight. You got that right. But let's tackle the problem.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan. Big stuff happening in Washington. iPhone that was used by the Pensacola shooter. And for 4 months, it took the FBI four months to get into that phone and found out that the terrorist, and that's what he was in contact with Al-Qaeda. I don't think Apple should be doing that. I think they should open the phone. What do you say?
Well, if you open the phone for one government, you also open the phone for a lot of different bad actors and different governments as well. Think of North Korea, think of China, think of Russia. So the Justice Department and the FBI, yes, scathing in their criticism yesterday because they say that the phones actually contained information that linked this Saudi pilot student. He linked back to Al-Qaeda. And in fact, it led to an arrest of one of his associates, they say, in Yemen. But from Apple's perspective, look, the Justice Department only contacted us a month after the shooting. If it was so important, why did it take a month for them to do that? And plus, we've been responding to all of their requests. And here's the statement that they sent out yesterday after the press conference, that scathing remarks that we heard from Bill Barr. We can bring it up for you. The false claims made about our company, they say, are an excuse to weaken encryption, other security measures that protect millions of users and national security. And they say that so much is done on your phones these days, so much important high security stuff. For instance, you also have nuclear reactors that now are run on apps. Imagine if bad actors can get into this type of information and operation, and what kind of threat that poses to the world.
Okay. Point taken. I think more people have to pay.
$1,000, so it'll be $8,000 on July the 1st. But Elon Musk says you can get it at a bargain for $8,000 because it's worth $100,000 someday. And this is full self-driving capability, meaning that it's not exactly entirely autonomous because the software has to keep up with the hardware, which it's not doing right now at this point. But in the future, he has a lot of ideas as to how to use this. So, for instance, instead of having your car parked when you're not using it, you can maybe rent it out for ride-hailing in the future. And then he says also he says in the future you could also possibly pay a subscription fee for this year instead of paying the outright $8,000 as well. But he says get it at a bargain. It's $8,000, could be worth $100,000 in just a few years.
Okay.
Yeah, the $1.8 billion startup with short-form videos and helmed by pedigreed CEOs. We're talking about Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman, has largely failed so far to spark as much interest. Only roughly around 3 million downloads so far since its release in early April. And that's despite, by the way, a 90-day free trial. And of course, we've had Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman on Varney & Co. Listen.
Yes.
Even though we are all right now sheltered in place and we're in our homes and probably watching more television, we're also watching a lot more on our telephones.
But when COVID hit, we made a decision. We originally thought we would have a 2-week free trial. Then we said, given the economic circumstances, let's just do 90 days for people. It'll give them a long time to not have to pay for the service. And then in 3 months, we'll know about, in the industry, they call it roll to pay, how many people decide to stay with us.
So Katzenberg blames the lack of interest in Quibi solely on the coronavirus because it's eroded what he calls the in-between moments. So these short-form videos are made for when you're waiting in line at the post office or at the doctor's office, or if you're on your long commutes. That hasn't happened because of coronavirus, so people are stuck at home. However, analysts say that their content just isn't that compelling, and their release strategy is not exactly the way to do it, because how they release it is episode by episode and not a full series that's being dropped so you can binge watch it.
Oh, I'm a binge watcher.
IPO just about a year ago. So Luckin Coffee is that Chinese company that was supposed to be a Starbucks killer. It turned out the COO fabricated around $300 million worth of sales last year. And you've seen a multitude of executives stepping down as well as a lot of big fund managers taking their money out of this company. So the CEO has stepped down, and now the NASDAQ says it's time to delist. In fact, it hasn't been traded since the start of April. So I guess this is just a black mark for corporate China.
They claimed they got a lot of revenue, and they didn't have it. Is that accurate?
Well, they didn't have $300 million of revenue, but that's a lot of money, isn't it? Especially, for a country like China that's still really relatively new to coffee drinking.
You're right. It's a black mark for China.
Corporation in Virginia, and there are questions today about why you're building this new supply chain and why you're investing so much money into one corporation when there's an entire generic drug industry that already exists in the U.S. But this is one of the largest contracts in U.S. Health and Human Services history. $400 million initially over 4 years into Plow Corporation that could be expanded to $800 million over the next 10 years. And what the Trump administration is trying to do here is trying to onshore pharmaceutical production, supply chains, protect vital drugs, especially antibiotics that we know has really been called into question in this COVID-19 outbreak, since China supplies about 90% of the antibiotics that are taken in this country. And that could also be squeezed in a tit-for-tat sovereign battle.
Got it, Susan. Thank you very much.